Mr. Minister, you seem to be the only person to think that ArriveCan is the pinnacle of all useful applications, but we have the labor union that says that it's slowing them down. Others saying that it's complicating things. Passengers are being threatened by fines of up to $5,000, and they apply to us because they don't really know what it takes to make this app a success. So faced with this, we are asking that you withdraw the application to take time to correct the mistakes. Why haven't you done that?
Mr. Chair, I thank you for the question. As I stated just now, ArriveCan enables CBSA and public health officers to ensure that international arrivals have their vaccination status accurately verified before entering Canada as per public health measures that we have. Without ArriveCan, processing time for international arrivals would increase significantly. Having said that, I know that there are those who have some concerns about ArriveCan. And I know CBSA and the Minister of Public Safety and Transport Canada and others are going to work with all of our stakeholders to ensure that the tool does its job as efficiently as possible. But I can assure you, if we suspend ArriveCan today, it will add significant complications to the congestions that we have at our airports today.
Well, it's still surprising to hear because you're the only person to say that ArriveCan is reducing the waiting period, but Canada is actually #1 globally when it comes to wait times at airports. So we are looking to be convinced, but we remain skeptical. I think that you have implemented a program that's not finalized, that's not complete, and that has real impacts on the lives of people, and they have to go into quarantine without any justification, and they're under a lot of stress. So right now we see that passengers are being treated like guinea pigs. Do you think this is normal?
Mr. Chair, opposition members in the past claimed that the transportation vaccine mandate, which now has been suspended, was causing the congestion. They were wrong. I can tell you, they're wrong when they claim that ArriveCan is causing congestions at our airport today. I have explained in all honesty and transparency the root causes of these congestions. We are working with our partners to address them. We're seeing significant improvements over the last 2 months that can be provided data to back it up. This is moving in the right direction. We will work with partners on ensuring that we can improve ArriveCan. We address the concerns that people have, but it's not causing the congestions at our airports.
Mr. Minister, it looks like you almost joined us to praise the steps you've taken, but I don't think people see it the same way. Now, when it comes to plane tickets, people plan things ahead of time, weeks and months in advance, but you have completely failed in the planning aspect of things. There is a report that has to do with CATSA that was in the press in May, and in May, they were missing 25% of staff. Now, things have picked up a bit, slightly improved in the month of August, but the problem was clearly on your end. So instead of taking action, you chose to blame airports and airlines. Why?
Mr. Chair, I mean, the report that my honorable colleague is referring to is exactly what I am saying right now. There is a labor shortage issue. And in May, all agencies and companies and airports had a massive labor shortage compared to the surge in demand that occurred then. We acted quickly. We were preparing for it, but the surge ended up being beyond what was expected, which is good news for the sector, but every player in the sector had to catch up. Significant improvements are taking place. I'm not here to applaud our government's action, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair. I'm here to applaud those who work on the front line in responding to the surge in demand. Let's recognize the progress that has taken place. Let's build confidence in our sector and acknowledge that there's still work to be done. But let's not dismiss the progress that has taken place over the last few weeks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Minister, On the 16th of June, the parliamentary secretary was saying in committee that the chaos and the airports, and they were saying this would have to do with micromanagement in daily operations. Now, today you're talking about your actions, you're saying that the situation is improving, so it looks like you've changed your stance on the issue. Now, you are trying to just absolve yourself of responsibility in this case. That's what it looks like.
Mr. Chair, I've been consistent since May. Labor shortage is the root cause of labor or airport congestions. Labor shortage at airports, labor shortage at airlines, labor shortage at other agencies, and there is an imbalance between the appetite of people who want to travel and the ability to service those who wanted to travel. Significant progress has taken place over the last few weeks, and we're seeing similar phenomena around the world. This is not just unique to Canada. This is part of the recovery from COVID public health measures that the world has witnessed over the last 2 years. This is not an excuse, Mr. Chair. These are the facts. And I am here to reaffirm our commitment to continue to work with our partners to ensure that we build on the successes that has taken place and continue to focus on addressing the remaining issues.
So as Bloc Québécois, we suggested that the air passenger protection regulations that applies to airline companies should also apply to the government and government agencies. This would enable us to make sure that passengers will be compensated when they have canceled or delayed flights due to mismanagement or incompetence from the federal government. This would prevent maybe a culture of impunity because right now there are no consequences to the government not taking care of issues or solving problems. Do you envisage applying these regulations to the federal side as well?
Mr. Chair, these regulations are done to protect passengers who enter into a commercial agreement with airlines to receive a service that they paid for. Governments, citizens are always able to hold governments accountable through their members of parliament, through elections, through various means, but passengers for the longest time had no recourse to ensure that airlines that they paid money to are able to provide the service that they paid for. That's the intention of these regulations. Is there an opportunity for us to continue to improve it? Sure, I am happy to work with my colleagues on figuring out how we can improve these regulations, but they're intended to protect passengers who enter into a commercial contract with airlines so they receive the service that they paid for.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. This is a bit interesting because consumers have no recourse when flights are canceled or delayed because of the government. So we are imposing rules and standards to companies, but the government isn't applying the same standards. It's a question of being coherent. So we can also talk about leaked documents that show that Air Canada has asked its staff to lie to passengers about the reasons for flight cancellations in order not to pay compensation. So even if the consumers actually complain, there's a backlog of 18,000 complaints, so their complaints will not be treated right away. So consumers associations are actually asking consumers to go to courts directly, bypassing this entity. So this organization is supposed to be the watchdog of passengers' rights, but it's completely inefficient. What do you think about this? A very short response, Minister, if possible.
Mr. Chair, CTA is an independent quasi-judicial body that is adjudicating these complaints independently. I can assure you that I have confidence in their ability to do their work and that our government will continue to assist them to ensure that they have the resources they need to protect passengers. I understand that recently the CTA issued a ruling that labor shortage could not be claimed as safety matter. So the CTA looks at individual complaints and adjudicates them based on the circumstances.
Our first question will be for Mr. Keenan. When it comes to the use of ArriveCan, I imagine there's data that is collected and used for different purposes. I think there's a number of 87% or 90% of people use it. Do you also collect data on the bugs and problems and the nature of these problems to understand whether these are fixed and how long it takes and the impact it has? Do you have information on that? Because it might be relevant that if such data exists, that it be transmitted to the committee.
Mr. Chair, je donne la parole à collègue
Mr. Chair, I would like to hand it over to our CBSA colleague to answer this question.
Oui, merci pour la question. Depuis le début.
Thank you for the question. Since the introduction of the application, we've had about more than 80 versions to continue to improve the utility of the tool and to adjust to the health measures that also evolved based on different orders. So we were always made sure to do testing with Google and Apple to make sure that everything was in order, that the app was in proper shape, and it could be made available to passengers. And we have kept a database, if you will, with information on elements that needed fixing in different versions or along the lines of different recommendations we received. Thank you. Just to confirm the information you provided, Mr. Vinet, there have been more than 80 versions of the application which came in the aftermath of changes in government policy or bugs that were detected. Is it the case? Yes, it is the case. Would you be able to give me a number or different numbers, data that might be relevant, just to understand, okay, initially we had 1,000 bugs and then 500 bugs in August. Would you have like an idea on that? I don't have the data, unfortunately, to answer this question, but most recently in the media, there was mention of 10,000 people or so using Apple phones, iPhones, who were impacted from for a couple-week period, and it took a couple of weeks to fix the situation. People were receiving emails to quarantine, so we detected these cases. We passed this information on to different colleagues, and this was fixed. Okay. So we are hearing from citizens about fines going up to $5,000 if they do not follow the directive. If it's a first offense, if it's the first time, this $5,000 fine would probably not apply according to another directive. But would you have an idea on the number of fines issued and the total monetary value? I would hand it over to my colleague, Ms. Lutfalla, on the fines, but we do collect the information coming through ArriveCan, and it is there is a 14-day quarantine. We also have information that 80 to 90% of people on a first trip, they actually make use of the application. Thank you.
So in terms of non-compliance with the ArriveCan and the potential monetary penalties that could be imposed on individuals, I just want to point out that our officers at the airports as well as land borders try to bring people into compliance rather than writing a ticket as the first measure. So we're playing a much more facilitative role. A ticket is not the first option that is exercised by our officers to bring compliance with the ArriveCan app. Since the inception, or since ArriveCan was made mandatory for both land and air, and I think it was in 2020 for air and 2021 for land, there's only been, I believe it's been 190 tickets with respect to ArriveCan non-compliance. In those cases, and they're very limited cases when you consider the overall number of travelers coming into our country, those individuals are individuals who are repeat offenders or simply will not comply with either giving us a paper submission, because we do offer that when they are referred over to VAC, or they just don't want to comply with the public health measures. So I want to underscore that the ticket amount, the number of tickets that have been issued have been extremely low for ArriveCan non-compliance, because our officers play a very facilitative role, and generally they are very successful in bringing people back into compliance with the law.
My next question will be for Mr. Vinette, but maybe someone else can answer as well. So during the pandemic, when we had quarantines in place, there were a lot of questions and reaction against how quarantines were being followed, and if there was any follow-up, because in some situations that wasn't the case. So I would like to know if the follow-up right now is effective and how it's being done. This would be a question for my colleague, Ms. Lutfalla.
So there's a multi-pronged approach that's being used for quarantine follow-up. Quarantine is generally applied for individuals who are unvaccinated or deemed unvaccinated because they were unable to provide us vaccine credentials. We, at the Public Health Agency, we have a, if you want to call it an escalation protocol, where we will start with phone calls. There will be reminders that are sent through ArriveCan to remind individuals of their quarantine as well as their testing obligations. We also have callers who will contact these individuals directly to make sure that they maintain their compliance with their quarantine requirement. But also these individuals, these callers, will call individuals who test positive to ensure that they meet the isolation requirements.